Hope live is starting. Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Say good morning once you hop on, so I know who's listening today and who's tuning in. First thing here, we're going to get started in just a minute. I'll give you just a couple more seconds to allow a few more people to jump on today on this Thursday. It is Thursday, February 24th. Gosh, next week is March already. Super excited about March. So, I know it's rare that I start right at 8 o'clock, so people may be coming in. Hello, I see we have some viewers. Just say hi in the comments, please. I love to be able to interact with you guys and just know what questions you have or comments. Today's topic is really a lot lighter than what we talked about on Thursday. So one of my favorite topics, honestly, to talk about is just the creative process. So just to get started, just my background a little. Those of you who maybe don't know, I have worked within Christian ministries, nonprofits, publishing companies, and organizations for most of my career, about 22 years. And I was always in the creative or communications, marketing, that kind of department. And the majority of the last half of my career, I was in some sort of team leadership. So I love leading creative teams as a writer and as someone who just has a lot of creativity and ideas. It's just a lot of fun for me to be able to work with other creative people. So one of the things I've learned is that there's just so much about creating that applies to life. Hey, say hi, guys. I'm going to see you. Hi, Janice. Hey, Carrie. Sorry, I had to scroll down a little to see the comments. So I think I want to start with just a few thoughts about what do I mean by creating, because I think sometimes women in leadership, or if you have a business or a ministry, creating might feel like, well, I'm not a creative person. Like I don't manufacture something. I don't build something that I'm selling or that kind of thing. But really the creative process is anything that's bringing something that doesn't exist into reality. Okay, so it could be you're writing a book, and that's bringing something that doesn't exist into reality. It becomes a tangible expression, right, of the calling within you, of the anointing on your life, of just what God has put in you, the message he's put in you. So it's bringing that into a tangible product, if you will. It could be a membership. It could be a book. It could be your coaching, like coaching courses, a coaching group. It could be your Facebook group. So whatever it is that you are building and creating out of your own heart and out of your own vision, to me, that's what I mean by creating. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Because I know a lot of women are like, oh, I'm just not creative. And maybe we have different levels of creativity or different styles of creativity. But the reality is we are all called to create. Like we were put on this earth to create, right? Adam and Eve, fill the world, subdue it and fill it. We're supposed to be creating and duplicating and replicating ourselves. So Jesus said, go make disciples. So we use these creative projects, right, to pull people in and closer to him and closer to the message and the anointing on our life. So I think I've covered that well enough. So I want you to think about your own life and what are you currently creating? Okay, when you look at whatever you're doing for your business or your ministry or just in life, and it could be, I love doing scrapbooks, like it could be the crafty sort of world. But when you think about what you're creating, put in the comments what you think you are currently creating. And I'll wait a minute, take a breath, have another cup of coffee that I probably shouldn't have this morning. So Carrie or Janice, I'm not sure who our other viewers are yet today. When you think about what you're creating, just drop that in the comments when you can. And then when you think about that creative process, I want you to also think about, like, what do you think you struggle with the most in that process? And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I want you to just start thinking, like, why does it feel hard sometimes? And why is that? Because I think a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today can help just shift your perspective a little bit about what is that the creative process. And that's why I call it this Embracing the Creative Chaos, a book. Awesome, Janice. And there is some chaos when it comes to creating. And some personalities struggle with that more than others, right? I'm someone who can handle a lot of chaos for a period of time, right? Especially if I know it's purposeful. And I was just walking down my hall. I don't know why I'm telling you guys this, but I was just walking down my hall today, and I've been trying to clean out some closets, and I've got a rug, and I've got these big pictures that my mother-in-law gave me, these big framed pictures, and I just need to put them to the basement to store them. And I'm like, this is what life looks like when I'm in the middle of creating something, because I'm in the middle of creating this community and my course and all of those things. So sometimes it's a little chaotic in the midst of that. So obviously, you know your threshold, but it's something that I've learned to be comfortable with, and I don't beat myself up over the stuff that needs to be done today. So, all right. And Carrie, you're working on Therapy Horse Pro. Oh my gosh, I love that. It's so beautiful. And Janice says distractions. Yeah, that's a good one. Focus can be hard when we're trying to create. All right, so let's jump in because I just have like 4 points that I want to talk about. Again, I want to keep this kind of light. I'll probably tell a lot of stories just about my own experience and my life. And if you guys have other thoughts or questions, please just drop them in there. All right. So the first thing I want to think about, or I want to share when it comes to creating, is that it really does take courage. Okay. Creating takes courage. To put the first word on paper, to start even thinking about like the strategy for your program there, Carrie, just thinking about those things, it takes courage to take that first step, right? Because all of a sudden we are stepping into an arena where it's just scary, like, especially if it's something we aren't familiar with, or we're putting ourselves out there in a different way. For me, stepping out of the steady job that I was in a year and a half ago to start something, that's taken a year and a half to begin to manifest, and just believing that I can create something out of nothing, really, in a lot of ways. It takes a lot of courage. And so it's okay to know that. It's okay to know that it's scary to take those first steps. It's scary to take next steps, but that each of those steps, if we can just keep moving forward. So what I say is like movement is really good. So even if we take like small steps, oh yeah, yes, Carrie, yes, exactly. But even if we take just small steps, any movement is good. Okay, so if we're just sitting and thinking and dreaming and we're not actually taking any action, it's really hard to have the courage to keep moving. And how many of you guys, the minute you do one thing, especially if you get some positive feedback on that, all of a sudden you start to think, okay, wait, I can maybe do this. Like I've made my first post on Facebook, or I've done my first Facebook Live. And all of a sudden your courage and your confidence begins to develop because you've taken those steps. So there's something really important about movement and staying in a place of movement. And even if you're just writing for yourself and you're like, every day I'm going to write 500 words, or every day I'm going to write 1,000 words, whether they ever go in my book or whether anyone ever reads them, I'm going to stay in that place where I am creating movement and momentum. So the other thing is that action actually breeds confidence. So if you want to be confident, take action. Because like I just said, doing those first steps and taking those steps, and especially if you start getting feedback, it just breeds all kind of confidence. And if you're just sitting on the couch thinking about what you should be doing or not taking any steps, you're not going to be confident in that. And then the other thing I want to talk about when you think about courage is just there's a difference between force and flow. Okay, hold on. I need to shut this little window. So I like to think about the creative flow. Yeah, it can be hard to stay moving forward. So this is something else it's a little hard sometimes to discern, because while movement is good and action is good, there can also be a space where action and movement is actually forced, and that doesn't feel good, right? So learning to understand the difference between when you're forcing something, and that's what I call like working from striving or self-effort, as opposed to working from flow. And flow is that creative space where you've just let go of the restraints, you've gotten in the right mind space, and you're just letting it flow from the Holy Spirit to you and out. And there is a different energy when you create from that space. And so I think sometimes when people are trying to create, writing is an excellent example. Obviously, I've been a writer for, 25, 30 years, and I've edited books, I've worked with authors, so I've done a lot of different things with the creative process. But it's really hard when every day, okay, let's say you do decide, I'm going to write 500 words, and now you go to sit down and there's no flow in that. So there's a whole other, it's probably a whole other teaching, but giving ourselves the freedom to get into that place of flow and not necessarily always be forcing it is an insight that we have to learn. Like as creators, we have to know, when am I pushing and when am I flowing? And then give ourselves grace when we're not flowing. And I've read a really good book. I think her name is Lori. Oh, what's her name? I'll have to tell you later. I'll put it in the comments. But she has a book called The Difference. And she talks about writing books that launch movements. And she talks about getting into this author space of writing where you just are letting it flow as opposed to forcing it. And there's, I'm trying to think exactly how she said it, but it's okay if sometimes you need to walk away and give your brain a little break. Okay, this is a really important part about creativity, is we can't just always push, push, push. Sometimes it's better to stop. And her example was like, you went and organized your daughter's closet. And you have to consider that part of the creative process, because while you're doing that, your brain is processing what it is that you're going to bring out when you flow. And so I think, I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but it's understanding how the subconscious works in creative work. Okay, and maybe some of you, like if you're thinking about something at night and you decide just to let it go, in the morning when you wake up fresh, all of a sudden like the answers and the words and the things that you need are there. That's because your subconscious keeps working on that. Okay, that's a super positive thing. But on the other hand, a creative mind is always processing. And so there are times you need to walk away and get your brain onto something else, and you can burn out really quickly. And so that's one thing I always tell my creative teams and the women that I've mentored, you know, my designers and other writers that I've worked with, is that it's okay to take that brain space, that break, that creative pause, because you will come back more focused and more free to get into that space of flow. And so just know when you're in that space where it kind of feels, it's okay to walk away from your computer. It's okay to take the rest of the day off. You know, it's okay to read a book, or it's okay to watch a show. Like whatever you need to do to get your brain out of that space will actually then re-energize you to come back. So does that make sense, you guys? I feel like I really just have some bullets I kind of wanted to talk about. So I'm hoping that it all makes sense and is helpful. All right, so the other thing about creating taking courage is that there's a suffering that can come in the creative process, and that's when you become impatient with the process. Okay, so this is the heart of embracing creative chaos, is this impatience piece. And this can happen when you might compare where you're at, like your middle, or even your beginning, with someone else's middle or ending, right? And I think I said this on Tuesday, is that if I'm looking at someone who's had the things that I'm building for years, I could look at that and get really frustrated because I'm so far from that. And so I get impatient and I need to hurry. And all of a sudden I put this pressure on myself and this urgency to grow and create and become. And it's caused by this faulty comparison, really, or this faulty impatience. And so I think there's something about settling into like where you're at and being okay with that. And it just gives you more freedom. It takes the pressure off, because pressure really is not helpful in the creative process. I know some of us work great with deadlines, and that's a different kind of pressure. But if we have this internal pressure that we're not where we should be, we may actually be hindering the creative flow. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let's see, what else did I say about that? So when you compare your middle to someone else's end, or if you start making the messy parts mean something. Okay, so this is part 2. This is huge. I could probably write a book on this. Maybe I will. That we think that the creative chaos means we're not going to get there. It means we're not good at what we do. It means we're not qualified. It means, oh, I don't really have a message. I thought I could write a book, but now I don't know what I'm talking about. And so if you let that messy middle or that creative chaos mean something other than you're in the creative process, and sometimes it's messy, because that's all it means, right? Is the creative process is messy. Watch your kids finger paint, okay? Just give them something messy to do and watch the process. You get to the end and it's beautiful and you want to hang it on your fridge, but in the middle you're like, oh my gosh, the chaos, why did I ever do this? And so it's the same way with the things that we're creating, right? So me walking down the hall, I have to decide, that's all part of the process. Like, I'm going to get all that stuff done. I'm going to get somebody in here to clean my house. Like, It's part of the process. It doesn't mean anything about who I am as a leader, as a woman, as a professional, as someone mentoring others and coaching others. It doesn't mean that I'm not qualified. It means that I'm in the middle of my creative process. So I want to just let that sink in a little bit, because that could bring tremendous freedom to those who are watching and those who watch this later, because I am going to share this replay later. But the mess doesn't actually mean anything. Okay? So now let's talk about that a little bit, because it really is just the process. Like I shared, the creative process is messy. Okay? Maybe creation with the Trinity and God and Holy Spirit and Jesus creating wasn't messy, but I have a feeling like you look at some of the animals and you're like, really, was that the middle, or was that like your end product? Like you really meant it to look that way? So I don't know what it was really like, but I think that there's always a beginning, a middle, and the actual creation. So letting that middle just be whatever it is, and just not being hard on yourself, like grace in the middle of that, I think is really important. Because like I said, if you start making that mean something about who you are and the gifts that you carry, all of a sudden your flow is blocked. All of a sudden the impatience kicks in. All of a sudden you don't have the confidence to take the next steps. So the other thing to think about with the creative process is that to create brilliantly, you may want to write this down, to create brilliantly, you have to fail brilliantly. So in this messy chaos of creating, you may have gotten, down a path part way and realized this is not the right thing, or I'm not doing this. I don't have the right message yet. And then you have to kind of put that aside and start fresh. And so that is a really hard thing, because that's a place where a lot of creatives just quit, because they don't have the heart to go back and start over, or to edit, or to revise, or to rearrange, or even rename, whatever you need to do that represents a fresh start for you. And I know this for myself, because I had a couple projects that I knew needed to be redone, and I put them off for months because the pain, like I know what I went through to bring them to the point they were at. And so having to back up and start over, but that's where we go back to that courage piece, right? We have to have the courage to go back and do those things when they need to be edited and revised. That is the creative process. Okay, Carrie, you've written books. You understand the editing and revision is part of the process. And when I was an editor, when I first worked with Marilyn Hickey Ministries, I was head of the editing department for a period of time. And I was kind of known as like the queen of the red ink. They would always say, oh, Sue's parting the Red Sea when she worked, because I was just giving a lot of editorial feedback on the things that were being written. But I just would always really appreciate my team and tell them, hey, this is just part of the process. Like when I turn stuff in, my stuff gets edited. There's nothing about that says you're not good at what you do. There's nothing about that says you're not a great person and you're not gifted. It is part of the process. So remember, even when you have to self-edit or a project doesn't go the direction you want, it's okay, because I'm saying it over and over and over, it is part of the process. So we have to embrace the full process. So we have to fail at times, because, you've seen kids, I'm going back to the finger painting, you've seen kids where they get really frustrated and they wad up the piece of paper and then they start fresh. And it doesn't matter, there's no harm done, right? Because what you learn from the first round is going to inform the second round. So it's not like that's wasted effort. And I was talking to a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and she said she wants to start writing more. And she's like, I feel like when I write, when I get all done, the paragraph at the end is the paragraph I want to start with. And I said, that is absolutely the creative process, because sometimes you have to get the layers off the top before you get to the heart of what it is you want to say or create or build. And we have a saying kind of at my team, at work where I've been working the past few years, is that you might as well just delete the first paragraph or two, because they're probably not going to be any good. Because it takes you a while to get to, okay, now I understand what I want to say. So that's that creative flow and that process. It just sometimes takes a while to get there. So if you fail, it's okay. You're just getting to the heart of what you actually should be doing. So, all right. So I think I kind of talked about under this stop making the mess mean anything is, don't judge the ending, someone else's ending, by the middle. Don't judge your ending by where you are in the process. because it doesn't mean you're not going to get where you want to go. And if you have this idea that that the way from where you are to where you want to be is a straight line, then that's not a good assumption to have because we all know just in life, right? You think about life never goes in a straight line. Life goes all over. Sometimes it goes backwards, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. And the creative process is exactly like that. So don't think you're just going to do 3 steps between here and where you're going. I mean, maybe you could create something in that form, but you're not going to create something truly out of your heart, something that is actually like anointed and living and breathing, which is what we really want, right? We want to bring forth creations that transform lives. And unless you're tapped into that living, breathing Spirit of God in that process. And so we have to be willing to like let the organic nature of the work take us somewhere and not be so, oh, I'm just going to write 500 words and then 500 words and then I'm going to publish and then I'm good, because it's not going to bring the result that you want. Okay. So I think that's good under stop making the mess mean anything. I mean, I feel like I want to talk a little bit more about how creators and leaders can let that process, what's the word I want to use? Accuse us. And if that's happening with you, I just want to encourage you today that it's just not reality. The process is the process, and it doesn't mean anything about your ability or your calling or your future. It doesn't. It just means this is where you are in the process. And so coming to full terms with that really will help you internally to be in that place of flow more often. So I might suggest maybe journal on that, maybe make a note and spend some time journaling on, okay, what am I letting where I'm at right now mean about who I am right now? Oh my gosh, that was really good. So I think what I said is journal about how am I letting where I am right now inform who I think I am right now. Okay, because it doesn't mean anything about that. All right, so hopefully that's helpful. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, so we've talked about creating takes courage. We've talked about the mess doesn't mean anything. And third, I want to talk about how perfectionism, procrastination, and confusion are actually all fear in disguise. Okay, so I've worked with a lot of women and men for that example, for that, purpose, but also mainly women, that they think, well, it just has to be perfect. I've got to keep revising. And I see this in my teams all the time. The designer wants to make a few more changes. The editor wants to rework a few sentences. And we've already gone 3, 4, 5 rounds. And I know at that point, there's something else going on. This is just fear kicking in because they're afraid it's not good enough, right? So fear I say fear is a master of disguise, because there are so many things in life that we think are the problem when really it's fear that's behind it. Confusion is a huge one. How many women, I just don't know what God wants me to do. Well, the reality is there's probably fear in the way, because if you know what God's called you to do, then you're going to have to either do it or deal with whatever reason you're holding back. And so it's easier to be confused than it is to admit that you're scared. I'm sorry, I don't mean that so blunt, you guys. I love you guys. But it's true. It's true. And so when you're talking about the creative process, when you get stuck and you think, I just don't know what to say in this next chapter, then take a step back, go to the Lord and say, okay, what am I actually afraid of right now? Because there is fear getting in the way. There's a limiting belief getting in the way of your creative process. And we think it's the work, or we think, oh, it's not good enough yet. But the reality is you might just be afraid to ship. And that's the goal of creative, right? Of the creative process, is to finally have something to ship. That's what Seth Godin says, right? Is you have to ship at some point. I use this with my teams all the time. You get to the point where you have to push the button. You have to publish the book. You have to launch the group. Like, you have to go live. There are those things that we just have to do. And if we come up with all the excuses or the procrastination, or I don't know what I'm going to say, I'm going to keep working on my notes until I go live. I've just got to have my notes perfect. It's actually that you're afraid. And perfectionism is just, I'm afraid I'm not going to be good enough. Or I'm afraid people are going to reject me, or people are going to, make fun of me or think I'm foolish, like whatever that is. And so I think we just need to be honest about that and be okay with it. Like, it's okay. And in my course, I wrestled with, because kind of my first obstacle that I work with leaders to overcome is this fear that can just paralyze you. And it's not that we won't ever have fear. It's that we have to know how to manage fear. And so I think I call it courage to overcome. No, it's not even overcome. I can't remember the words right now, but the point is, it's having the courage to move on in the face of fear. That's what it is. Keep moving in the face of fear, because fear is never going to go away. So just take a deep breath, realize we're all scared a lot of the time. And it's okay, because that we can just use that in the process to learn, okay, where do I need to grow? Where I need to be more confident. I need to just trust God more. I need to realize that my performance doesn't mean that, like, if people love this book or hate this book, it doesn't mean that I'm a good person or a bad person or I'll never have the ministry I want. It just is. So I think that's a really important thing to think about, is how does fear actually influence my creative process and progress? And then be okay with that and just work through that. That's that inner work. That's why the first whole module of my course is about heart work, the heart of a leader, because we have to get through these things that are limiting us internally. So, all right, I think I've talked about that enough, because at some point, so thinking about fear and how it shows up, at some point you need to ship. Okay? And I know some of you are like, oh, but really you need, yes, Janice, fear is a liar. But fear also reveals limiting beliefs and areas where we're maybe not sure enough that we have to work through to have that courage, right? Like we talked about in the first section. So anyway, and I tell this to my team all the time, like using the example of the designer or the writer, there are times when I say, okay, we're done. It is good enough. We could keep looking at it for weeks, months, years. And a lot of authors, right, have books for years that they never ship because they're still in that fear pattern of it's not good enough. And it aggravates me. And I don't know if it's because I'm an activator in my strengths and I love shipping. And often my problem is I ship too soon and I need to step back a little. But the reality is, what you've got, if you feel like you've put the time in, one of my coaches says you can just do it at 80%, like launch at 80%. You can fix the other 20 later. Now, granted, if you're publishing a print book, right, that's a little different. But the point is, understand like what the work requires. And I do tell this to my team all the time. If we're working on a project and they are trying to get it to A+, like they want this to be 100% on their paper, they want a 4.0, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's okay, because sometimes C is good enough. And it's not a very popular thing for people, especially, type A leaders, but sometimes C work is good enough. I know that's hard to hear, isn't it? Because we're so taught that serving God means we do everything excellently. We want everything to be A+. But the reality is, if we're sitting around waiting for everything to be A+ and we're not shipping anything, then we're missing the boat completely. And so I think I just want to encourage you, sometimes it's okay to launch your Facebook group, even if, and I did this, I changed the name of my Facebook after I had 400 people in it. And I just knew I needed to start connecting with women. And so we had professional Christian women winning at work. And then I realized that's not exactly capturing the heart of the women that I'm called to work with. Oh, no problem, Dara. It's good to see you. And so I changed it. And no harm done. It's just the process. And so it was okay to ship and start. And I connected with 400 women. So it's not like that was a fail. It was just, even at sea, I needed to ship. So I think that's something just to really sit with and say, okay, are there things that I'm holding back on that probably are ready to go, or that I could at least take some first steps in and get some feedback on or start engaging people with? Because sometimes C work is okay. And I'm sure I can imagine, like if I was a celebrity and people would take that quote out of context. I'm not saying be sloppy. I think whatever we do is brilliant. And probably most of our C work, everybody here, exactly, Janet, sometimes our C work is an A to others. I'm sure everyone on this, what we do at a C level, other people will be astonished by, because we are amazing 10 talent women. Let's be honest. We're 5 full gifts, 10 talent women. What we do is amazing. One of my favorite quotes I have on my bulletin board, I see it when I get out of the shower every morning, is, what's obvious to you is amazing to others. And you need to remember that, because we often downplay like the insight that we have, or the revelation, or the experiences we've had, the transformation we've gone through, because it's familiar to us. And so we think, well, that's not that exciting, or that's not, that big of a deal, but it is. And so shipping at even a C, I love that, Janet, really will connect with the people you're called to lead and to serve. So sometimes that's okay. And you do know sometimes A plus is needed, right? There are times when A plus is needed, but it's not as often as we think. And it's not realistic to think that every single thing we do is going to be at that level 100%. And I loved getting A's in school. Like it meant something to me. Oh, I'm tapping into something here. If you ship at a C level and not an A level, you have to wrestle with the identity piece that's going to come up, because your performance mind, right? Your performance driven mindset is going to always want that A. And so that in and of itself is something that will give you the opportunity to work through that, because being performance driven in a ministry world is going to frustrate you. Okay. It's just you're never going to get anywhere, because we're not called to perform. We're not called to earn. We're not called to strive. We are called to just give, really. We're just called to give out of the gifts that God's put in us. And the gifts that we carry are amazing to other people. And they're hungry and they're thirsty for the things that are in our lives. And we need to get past any of those mindsets that think it's not good enough. So I could probably preach on that all day, but I think I've given you the nugget that you need there. Might be another journaling note, right? Would I be comfortable shipping a C product? And why or why not? Why does everything have to be an A to me? And you might get to the heart of maybe some insecurities or some fear, or like I have, and I talked about this on Tuesday, I have worked through, I don't want to say I'm completely free, but I've worked through some pretty serious rejection issues, insecurity like crazy. Those of you who know me probably heard the story that, I used to run away from kindergarten and run home. I hated being in school. I was so insecure being outside of my home at age 5 because of just the craziness of my upbringing. And I would literally run home from school and cut class in kindergarten because I just was so insecure and I couldn't be out in the real world. Like it was just unnerving to me. And I'm not an introvert. It's just, it was unnerving. So what is my point in all that? I think my point is you have to work through those insecurities and fears and limiting beliefs and whatever it is that you think, I can't ship anything less than perfect. And it's not true. What you ship at any level is going to be something, and a lot more than a lot of women do, because a lot of women don't ever ship anything. I meet a lot of women who are older than me that have dreamed about something for a long time, but have never taken the steps to work through what's actually holding them back. So that's a little off track from the creative process, but it's also like if we want to create things out of our heart that are actually meaningful and powerful and transformative to others, we have to do this hard work. And so the creative process just becomes sort of an outworking, right, of what's happening inside as we work through the process. And that's why it's so awesome to actually jump into it, because until you're in the process, you don't have the opportunity to start saying, wow, why am I blocked around this? Why is this a challenge for me? And then you have the opportunity to take some of that reflective time to say what's going on inside of me that's interfering with what I want to be doing outside. All right. So I think that's pretty much the points I wanted to make. Creating takes courage, because it takes courage to look at what's going on inside, even as we're creating outside. Stop making the mess mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you, about your future, about whether you're called or not. It doesn't mean that. That perfectionism, procrastination, and confusion are all fear in disguise. And that at some point you need to ship. So we talked about that a little. And I think I want to ask you, what do you think you struggle with the most? So just pop that in the chat while I'm wrapping up here. I wanted to keep this under 45 minutes just because I know we're busy. So what do you think you struggle with the most, whether it's something we've talked about or something else? And I know some of you already put let's see, just being distracted, other things like that. Yes, making the mess mean something. It's so critical too, isn't it, Carrie? I have a coach, and she says we are meaning making machines, which means anything that happens in life, we want it to mean something. And sometimes the facts are just the facts, right? Fear of failure. Yeah, that's good, Janice. You can dig into that and just see what is it about that that's maybe holding you back. I mean, I know you're out there, you're doing stuff, you're shipping. All right, so the last question I just want to leave you with, if you want to identify, like, are there places where you're making the mess mean something? Is there a place where fear is stopping you? Is there internal pressure or expectation that is blocking the flow of creativity in your life or in your ministry? This is a question you can ask yourself. Okay, so you probably want to write this down. Oh, Pam. Well, I'm glad you're here today. I hope that this is helpful. Okay, so here's the question. So write this down. What's the worst thing that could happen? So wherever you're procrastinating, wherever you're being hard on yourself because you're not farther along, just stop and say, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen in this scenario? So let's think about that. Maybe, Carrie, you write your book and nobody buys it. That's the worst thing that could happen. Okay? Maybe it's not, but I'm just saying. So why does that bother you? So if you stop and say, what's the worst thing that could happen and why does that bother me? You may get to the heart of some unbelief. You may get to the heart of where is this fear coming from. So I think those are some really good reflective questions to ask yourself anywhere in the process, really. If you haven't started, or if you're like, I know this is good enough to ship, but I just can't hit the button. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I launched my Facebook group. What's the worst that could happen? I knew I had to have the right name by 500 people. So the worst thing that could happen is I get to 500 people and I don't have the right name. Well, why does that bother me? Well, it bothers me because I feel like, oh, there's so many things. Like, it'll look like I don't know what I'm doing. I might have to change the name and then move the whole group. Or, like, there's all these scenarios that I could come up with. And then you ask yourself, why does that matter? Like, why does that matter? Well, I don't want to look foolish. Or I don't want people to think I'm not professional. Or I don't want people to think I don't have my crap together. I mean, whatever it is. You get the point. So I think that's a good exercise to just stop and think. Okay, so let me see. What other questions did we talk about that you could reflect over? Maybe you guys took notes and you can put those, because we talked about a couple other places where you could stop and say, like, where are you making the mess mean something? That would be a good question. Don't judge the ending by the middle. So are there places that you are judging either your ending or someone else's ending by where you are, or vice versa, I guess? Is there something that you're ready to ship, but fear is holding you back? That's a great question. And then maybe the last question on that perfectionism piece, like, why am I insisting on A+ work and not being okay with the mess and the creative process being what it is? So I don't know how many of you have been, like, in creative worlds before. And I don't know how much of this just comes out of because I've been through the process so many times with so many different projects. I mean, I've done everything, and I'm just going to share some of the different things that I've worked on, just because I think it might be fun for you to understand, not to toot my horn. But, like, the very first thing I did, I think creatively, I mean, as an adult, not as a kid, was I launched a blog called The Homeschool Encourager. And I wrote a weekly email devotional, like encouragement devotional to homeschool moms. I built my website on Microsoft Pages, because this was before WordPress. So I remember getting in there I didn't know anything about that. Okay. I was telling someone yesterday, I used my Outlook to send emails, and my list got to over 1,000 people. So I was using Outlook to, like, I had to batch them, like 500 and 500, because Outlook would just, like, I can't send that many emails, before I ever discovered, like, Constant Contact and MailChimp. But the point is, I was willing to do that. I mean, when I first started, I had 13 people that were in my little homeschool group. And I said, hey, I have this idea. Would you guys like to get this email? And then by word of mouth, literally within 4 years, I had like over 1,000 women. And this is before any of the tools we have now. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I was willing to just try something. There was no revenue. There was no business model. It was just, I wanted to encourage other moms. So that was one thing that I did. Then in my jobs, I used to work on a monthly magazine with Marilyn Hickey Ministries, which is where I worked. She had a monthly or a bi-monthly magazine. So doing the editing for that, working with the team, putting together all the creative pieces, working with designers, creative directors, all that kind of thing. And then I also did some editing of books for her. So that was part of, creative process that you have to go through. I like doing books. They're not my favorite because they're a little tedious for me. I tend to like quick return. I'm not a quilter because it just takes way too long and you have to have everything so perfect. I'm more of like a scrapbooker where you just throw stuff on the page. Then I worked at Group Publishing. You guys probably know Group. They do the really cool VBSs. And I was in their adult ministries department, and I did a blog for church volunteer leaders, how to work with leaders. So I did blogging and emails there. And then I also worked on several books, like compilation books with authors doing devotionals for women. So those are some projects I worked on. And then in the missions agency I'm in now, one of my favorite projects is we did like an end of the year magazine 2 years in a row. And it was something we've never done as an organization. And they'd always done calendars. And I was like, you guys, nobody does calendars anymore. So we tried this to shift an old organization to not getting a calendar every year to do this magazine. And it was told about our story. We had stories from missionaries. It was beautifully illustrated and photography. And they were lovely. And we got a lot of grief. I don't want to tell you this, but we had a lot of grief leading up to that because we were trying something completely new. And we had a lot of pushback. Why aren't we doing a calendar? Like, why are we doing something different? Nobody had the vision except me and my team. And then when it was done, literally everybody was like, you guys hit this out of the park. Like, you set a whole new level for what we could do as an organization. So those are those creative risks that sometimes we have to take. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying every step of the way, you have to learn to take those risks and be okay with that. And so that's that courage piece, because creating a new reality, building a ministry that's actually going to impact people and transform lives. And like we've talked about, legacy ministry, where you're talking about generations and generations who are impacted by the work that you're doing today. Like, that has to come out of our heart. That has to come from a space of being willing to take risks and do something different. And even just the business model that I'm building, I've worked with several coaches, and I just felt like the Lord saying, I want to do something different. I want you to just do what I tell you to do. And so it's not just following some formula. And I think you guys are those groundbreakers too, those pioneers, right? That are going to be doing ministry in different ways and going to be bringing different messages forward to touch the lives of women and families and marriages and all the things that you're called to do. So I could wax on that forever because I'm excited to be working with you guys. Oh, good job, Carrie. So you took a big risk leaving your job to do, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad we've connected. I'll be anxious to support you in that. So, all right. Do you guys have any other thoughts or questions? Pam, if there's anything you want to throw in there that we can help you with today, what you're working on, where you're struggling. I'll take a breath. Obviously, this is something I feel like I could just talk about for hours and hours and hours because I just find it so fascinating, and I just have, experience in this. I'm not an expert yet, but it's just something I really enjoy thinking about. So, all right, we have 2 more minutes. Any other thoughts or questions you guys want to pop in? All right, well, hopefully that's helpful for you guys. And I just think I love being in the space where we can just think about this together and imagine together and dream together. I will tell you, I am like an ideas person. So I am someone who is ideas morning, noon, and night. So if that's ever helpful to you, just like reach out. We've talked about maybe doing some creative brainstorming sessions just, with members of the group, if we want to hop on a call and just talk about where we may be stuck or where we need some fresh inspiration, because I just love doing that. And that's part of my role within this tribe and within my community and course, is just to be able to inform, bringing some fresh perspective and fresh ideas into the things that you guys are building. So I consider it an honor, and I'm happy to share. I'm generous with all of that because I just can't help myself. You probably like too many ideas, but that's just who I am, and I'm okay. I think God wants to use that, for all of you as you grow your stuff. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to hop off. All right, Carrie. Yeah, I know. I'm going to say that too, Carrie, because now that I'm working for myself, I'm still working with my team, but it's just like in a contract setting. And so I miss the collaboration. And so that's why I really love just even my tribe that we're building on Facebook, and then my, my communities and my courses. Like, that's a huge part of what I enjoy doing. And so creating a collaborative environment where we're really helping one another and becoming that team to one another that you maybe left a job and don't have that. So that's awesome. I hope that's a big part of who we can be, as part of just inspired Christian women and leaders and things. So, all right, you guys. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for being on today. Go do that work. Think about where are the things that are holding you back. Answer those questions. And if there's anything I can do, you guys want to hop on a call, or you want to know more about the community and course and things that we're going to be launching, just reach out, because I'd love to invite you guys into that. I think it's going to be a really powerful thing in the lives of the women who are just called to lead, and who are called to innovate, and who are called to create. So, all right. Thank you guys. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. I love you guys. See ya.